This is Disability in the Public Square. This is John Robinson, mid-August 2026. Ann Burdick put together some information today on the Preferred Source program. I noticed something on Facebook last week and I wanted to address it. I asked Ann independently just to look up the Preferred Source program, and here's the information.
The Preferred Source program, which helps New York State residents with disabilities find employment, is gaining support throughout the state. Historically, the program is renewed every 3 years by New York State, and the contract is set to expire in 2028. However, supporters of the agreement are advocating that it needs to become permanent due to this program's ability to increase employment among the disabled community. Supporters also know this agreement helps to increase the variety of jobs available and reiterates that business owners should greatly consider hiring people with disabilities. Currently, there are about 150 businesses and organizations under contract with the Preferred Source program. The majority of jobs offered are custodial work and document imaging opportunities. The individuals with disabilities who have been hired by these entities complete over half the work necessary to keep these businesses running. In 2023, this equated to about 4,800 employees completing 36 million hours of work. Assemblyman John T. McDonald III states that many of these opportunities listed do not represent all the jobs that people with disabilities can perform, and he's in favor of this program becoming a permanent and revamped solution since it's currently outdated. Howard Gross, CEO of eBizDocs, sources employees from the Preferred Source program agreement. He and Assemblyman McDonald are not the only supporters of this agreement. According to a Rockefeller Institute of Government survey, after about 1,000 voters were educated on the Preferred Source program, 85% of those voters agreed this initiative should be expanded upon. We will now hear from John Robinson regarding his feedback and thoughts on the Preferred Source program.
Ann just talked to you about the New York State Preferred Source program, and I saw something last week on Facebook and I wanted to address it, and there's a reason I want to address it. And I do think the voices of independent advocates for people with disabilities should speak out and should think about what's going on. And let me explain. The Preferred Source program is a great program, and it's 50 plus years in New York State. Other states have done something very similar. And what, in essence, what it tried to do is to get more state products and services made by and served by individuals with disabilities through contracting opportunities. And that is a good thing and a very important thing. And I don't want to diminish that. There's a lot of good work. I think the number was 4,800 people employed, and that is fantastic. And so I think the Preferred Source program is something that should continue. And as Ann said, in a lot of the cases, most of the work is janitorial, is manufacturing, is lawn care, et cetera. They're entry-level type positions. And so those positions are important, and it's great that we're hiring individuals with disabilities to do the work. But there's also another part of this that needs to be discussed, and this is where it truly bothers me. And this is the confluence of ableism, greed, and state government. And please allow me to explain a little bit why I say that. First and foremost, jobs can be performed by individuals with disabilities, but that also means all jobs could be performed by individuals with disabilities. And when there's 1 out of 5 people in New York State that have a disability, we're not just the stereotype. And unfortunately, what has happened when the Preferred Source program is discussed, a lot of the stereotype is reinforced. And as Ann said, and I didn't prompt Ann to say anything other than look up the Preferred Source program, even in their own words, they're talking about janitorial and landscaping jobs. And that's important work. Please don't get me wrong. But there's many more of us out there that could be supported by programs that would help individuals with disabilities find meaningful employment. New York State is an employment first state, which means employment should be the first opportunity for individuals with disabilities. You're starting to see more internships by state agencies. You're starting to see more employment opportunities at state agencies. You're hearing more about the Employment First organization coming out of the Chief Disability Office. It's really, really important work. And so that is what should be supported. The other element that is mentioned is the 3-year re-up by OGS and by the New York State government versus the permanent status. And I want to address that a little bit. It frightens me that one agency would have permanent status by New York State government and that it wouldn't be reviewed every 3 years like it is right now. What could happen? Nothing should be permanent. As a matter of fact, there should be term limits for elected officials. There should be term limits on contracts. There should be term limits on anything. And so, for the preferred source program to be non-limited in time will only create more opportunities for abuse. What else? If you look at the 990 of New York State Industries for the Disabled for the past 3 years, the 990s have gone up, and I'll look it up as I look at this. In 2023, there was $29,762,000 plus of net assets by NYSED. 2022, it was 26,600,000. 2021, it was 28 million. And so they're sitting on, if you believe the net assets, and in 2024, let's go to the most recent, $34 million in net assets as an independent nonprofit that is legislated, but right now has to be looked at for every 3 years. If you look at their revenue over the years, it has steadily gone up, which is great. That means they're doing good work supporting employment for individuals with disabilities. But 2024 net revenue went down. The bell curve is starting to come down. But their net assets went up. If you read the press release and you read through the lines of what's going on, you're starting to understand that it's getting harder to employ individuals with disabilities in some of these programs. Yet at the same time, we've got the Employment First Commission, which has a budget that is much, much smaller. And that budget comes directly from our taxes, that is supporting all work for individuals with disabilities, not just through the Preferred Source program, but work for individuals coming out of colleges, community colleges, universities, work that just comes from independent individuals with disabilities that are not supported, promoting with corporate America in New York State that people with disabilities should have the first option for jobs. Not just the Preferred Source program, but banks, financial institutions, education systems, right on down the line, anywhere that you employ people with disabilities. Look at the work that's gone on with Global Foundries in the Capital Region in the last 10 years, or Micron that's going to happen in Syracuse. The Employment First people get to say to those organizations, hey, there are people with disabilities out there that can do work too. Now, in other states, when there have been preferred source type opportunities, that money is legislated to go back into supporting other programs. But in these cases in New York State, those entities are sitting on that money. Now, there's some good work being done by other entities, but NYSED is sitting on a bulk of the work. They're sitting on $34 million. As I sit here, have been running our ability for the past 15 years, what could we do with $34 million? What could the Employment First Commission do with $34 million? What could the independent livings do across New York State if the $34 million was spread out? I say that because we that are supporting individuals with disabilities employment throughout all systems are fighting against a stereotype that we can only do janitorial and landscaping services. And again, I'll say it for a third time. The Preferred Source program does good work, but that money should not be sat on like a nest egg. That money should be reinvested back into New York State. And quite frankly, the 3-year up should be the check and balance against permanent status. And they should be asking directly, how are you reinvesting that $34 million into the community? Ann talked about the Rockefeller report. And what you also need to know about the Rockefeller report, which does good work in looking at the numbers of employees or people with disabilities that have come through the Preferred Source program. But please understand, the Rockefeller report is paid for by NYSED. They don't do it independently. They're paid for to do it. So as NYSED quotes it, I have to understand that it's being paid for. Now, finally, I also have to recognize our history and our ability with NYSED. For about 10 plus years, we did the videos for their annual meeting, and I enjoyed meeting all of the people we interviewed and editing all of the videos and feeling warm about employment for individuals with disabilities, but truthfully also frustrated that that money was not being reinvested. At our ability, when we did the journey along the Erie Canal and we cycled across New York State, the first year or two, we were supported by NYSED. And it was a great experience. Also, some hard feelings because we got the recognition and NYSED was a little upset with that. And then when I was on Capitol News 9 in the past 5 years talking about subminimum wage and my support for eliminating subminimum wage in New York, NYSED in essence fired us from doing those videos. I'm not shying away from our history. I'm not shying away from the work that we did. And it's not even because of that. It's because that as a New York State tax-paying citizen, as a New York State citizen with a disability, I believe all people with disabilities can do this work. And I believe if we're going to fight ableism, we do need to support the preferred source program, but we also need to have a check and balance against it. And we also need to recognize that people with disabilities can do other work, can work for state agencies, can work for independent organizations, can work for Fortune 500 companies in New York State, and that money should be reinvested back into these programs. You know, in New York State alone, at New York State community colleges, and universities, there's over 100,000 students with disabilities in private and public schools in the college systems. Imagine what $34 million would do if you reinvested in those 100,000 people. We can do so much more. I share this with you because it's a frustration point. Now, do I think the permanent status will be granted? Unfortunately, yes. Unfortunately, yes, that's been, as you heard with some assembly members and senators, they bought into it. I believe it should be supported, but not the permanent status. Every 3 years, an independent agency should look at the 990s and ask, what are you doing with the money? What are you doing with the money? It's that important.